gentlemen. And it is time for us to move right along and view with our in keeping with our view of the future that we want to sort of establish today. It's time for our opening keynote. And for those of you who didn't have enough coffee, this one should be about as strong as, or equivalent to a good jolt of strong coffee. Alvin Graylin is with us today. We're delighted to have him here. He's an entrepreneur and a technology pioneer who's been driving innovation in the worlds of things like AR, XR, VR. He's going to be talking in a lot of acronyms just now, so we'll have to probably pick those apart in our Q&A afterwards, but he's been in that area for over 30 years. His current research is in something called immersive technology and how AI and extended reality will actually change the world. So just so that you are aware, he recently co-authored with Louis Rosenberg the book, Our Next Reality. He'll show it to you. It's up here on the table. How the AI-powered metaverse will reshape the world. And he argues that it's going to happen much faster than any of us think. And that if we're already spending most of our waking hours actually consuming some form of digital content, that our next level is going to be an immersive metaverse. And his question is, are we ready for it? Please welcome Alvin Graylin. Great to see you.
Thanks,
and
Karin.
The floor is yours, Alvin.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for getting up early and fighting the traffic. Oops, I think this is... So the last panel was talking about looking into the future, and I hope over the next 30 to 45 minutes we're going to give you a view of what the future is going to look like soon and how you should be playing a part to make that future a better one. So, I've been, as Karin said, I've been studying and doing work and researching in AI and XR for the last 30 plus years. I worked at MIT, I studied at MIT, I worked at IBM, at Intel, the last 8 years at HTC, and have also founded 4 different startups, 3 of which were AI related. So I should be able to give you a more practitioner's view of what's coming. And I think a lot of people right now have a relatively dim view of where the future is. So I actually want to do a little test and tell me if you think the world's going to be better in the next 10 years, hold up a green one. And if you think it's going to be a little bit worse or very worse, hold up a red one. Okay, so it looks like about half and half. Okay, so I'm going to ask you this again at the end of the session, and maybe we can see if we can change that a little bit. So my proposition is that the future is actually not determined. And it's up to our generation, the people sitting in this room who are in leadership positions today, that will determine where things go. So it's important for you to actually see the future, as what the last panel said, and I think this data should give you a sense of where it's coming. And I'm not as worried as most people, because I have spent the last 30 plus years looking at technology and seeing how it's progressed. And I put a lot of that into this book, and the person on the left over there is Neil Stephenson. He's a sci-fi author. I don't know how many of you have heard of him, but he's the person who coined the word metaverse in the book Snow Crash. And he talks about a future where it's relatively dystopian. I think we can avoid that type of a future. And I think here's some things that may challenge you a little bit. So earlier in the panel, it was requested that we talk about things that challenge you. And I will say that right now, Mark Twain's quote here is quite relevant to what we're talking about, because there's a lot of things that we think are true that just are not. And that is the more dangerous thing than not knowing. Right? So here are a few examples of things that actually you have been lied to, in the sense of, I think that the press and the people that are out there talking about this technology is not giving you an accurate view. A lot of people say that AI is just a tool. It's just repeating it, just like a parrot. It's not true. People will say that we're running out of compute, we're running out of power, we're running out of data, so AI is not going to progress. It's not true. They say that AI takeover is going to be, these robots are going to come get us. It's not true. And a lot of people are trying to create an AI arms race and thinking that is a solution to our problems. It actually will be the reason for our problems. A lot of people are worried about their jobs. Yesterday, I think someone on the panel said the most important thing is to make sure we have enough jobs. My message to you is actually jobs may not be what you think it will be in the future, and not having a job may actually be the best thing that ever happened to you. Sovereign AI is a solution that people keep talking about, saying, oh, every country needs to have their own AI. And I will tell you why that's actually one of the worst things we could be doing. And XR devices, things that are VR, AR, it's not boxes on your head anymore. It's things that start to look like this, right? 200 grams, they can do AR, VR on the same device. Very soon, we will have devices like this that are 30, 40 grams that have the displayed capabilities on it. So we are not that far away from having devices that are on our face that will give us a different view of the future or different view of the world, no matter who you are. And advertising has what's been driven the internet so far, but it should not and cannot be the way that we finance the future of the 3D internet. People have talked about UBI, and a lot of people say we can't afford it. My point is we cannot afford not to have it, and I think very soon you will understand why. And one of the bigger questions is artificial general intelligence possible? I actually think that it is not only possible, it will be coming very soon. It will be one of the biggest changing forces that we will have in our world. So let's start with a little bit with kind of how media has progressed and why I believe that we will be moving towards a 3D world in terms of how we interact with computers. If you look at over the history of media over the last 100 to 200 years, we've gone from text only to one-dimensional content to two-dimensional video to then 2.5-dimensional video games. Now we are moving into XR devices that give you full 3D, full natural interfaces. We have been trained to use very unnatural things like keyboards and mouse to interface with technology. What we as humans have evolved in is a 3D world that are using our limbs, our eyes, our feet, our bodies as the way we interact, and that is how we should be interacting with the future of these technologies and of computing. So we have so many screens in our lives today, right? But it's hard to believe that if you go back just 120 years, we had 0 screens in our lives. It was actually only in 1895 when the Lumiere brothers put the first screens in our lives with the big screen. And over the next several decades, next 100 years, every few decades, we would add a few screens, from the TV to then the computer to phone to tablets, and now to XR devices. And you would think, oh, look at this trend. We're going to have dozens of screens in our lives. It's actually the opposite. Very soon, the screen that's on your face will start to replace every single screen on your wall, on your desk, and in your pocket. And at some point, we will go back to having those screens again because we may actually have a chip in our head. I'm not really looking forward to that, but that is a potential future. So we have devices like this that are able to do high-quality VR and AR. And people think, oh, do we really need to get to this next level? Like, I don't know how many of you guys are Netflix fans, but if you watch the 3-Body Problem, this is what they say is the next level XR, and it gives you feelings and smell and taste and everything. We don't need to get there to be able to use this technology to help us have a better view and a better tool to interact with the world. In fact, I almost think going the other way, going to smaller, thinner, lighter, would actually be more powerful in terms of helping us get to a new way of interfacing faster. Just like the device I just showed you here. I mean, this is the device on the bottom left corner. And each of these, some have displays, like the one I have right here. It doesn't have a display, but it does have cameras, it does have microphones, and it does have the ability for me to interact with AI, allowing me to answer any question I want in real time. And with those, this one actually has a display that will give me answers that I can see without hearing anything. And the one that's on the bottom right actually has 2 displays. And these are things that are available today. You can buy for $300, $400. Right? They are not out of the price point of what most people think that it's going to be far, far away. They're available now. If you look at how technology and media has evolved over the last 10 years, something that wasn't in our pocket 10 years ago, we didn't think about it as a way to interface. And now it is actually the primary way we interface with the internet and with apps. In the next few years, we will have these new devices on our face that will be on our face essentially from the time we get up to the time we go to bed. And it will take greater and greater parts of our waking screen time, right? So it may seem like a bad thing. We're going to have screens all around us. Actually, I feel like it may actually be a healthier thing to be looking and be able to see the world and give you information in real time when you need it, not to look down and see a screen on your hand, but be blinded to everything around you. So this actually may be a better way, even if it gives you more screen time. So talking about media, one of the most famous media pundits or philosophers is Marshall McLuhan, and he said something that I think a lot of people heard, but they don't understand. And it's the medium is the message. What does that mean? So let me go through the 3 stages of media so far. The one-to-many stage, the broadcast media. What is the message it is sending? It is sending a message of control, and it is telling the listener to conform to whatever the message is. Whether it's print, radio, TV, it's all giving the same message. This is the right thing, believe me. Do what I say. The current medium is social media. It's many to many. And what is this telling you? It is telling you to compare. And what do we know comparison does? Comparison is a thief of joy. And I think Theodore Roosevelt said that. And this is why our generation and a lot of the younger generation are becoming more and more depressed. And it's compelling you. This technology allows you and compels you to keep using it, keep clicking it, because that's how they make money. That's the problem with today's advertising-driven media model. Where we will soon go is actually the other way, many to one. Multiple AI agents making real-time content for you as an individual to make you a more complete person and to make you comprehend the world better. And I think that's a better form of media than we've had so far. So most people, when they think of the metaverse, they think of a dystopian future of just horrors and being in a matrix. It doesn't have to be that way. And a lot of people have misused this term to create a lot of confusion. What I would like you to understand is actually it's a very simple thing. The metaverse is something that is just the 3D version of the internet we've been building for 30 to 40 years, powered by AI, interface through devices like XR devices. Initially, the first few years, actually most people will interface with it through traditional 2D screens, but more and more they will move into 3D type devices that are on your face. And it will be an optimal way for you to receive this content. So is the metaverse going to happen? Yes, it's inevitable. But it may not be called the metaverse when it actually does happen. And I think that's really the key. It doesn't matter what it's called. The fact that we evolved to be optimal in a 3D world means that the optimal media for us is a 3D interface. Now, to the term that we've been hearing essentially nonstop for 2 years, artificial intelligence, right? This is also something that are all part of multiple sci-fi dystopian movies. And people are afraid of it because they think that robots are coming. It doesn't have to be that way either. Right? In fact, most people today think of AI, they think of generative AI. And generative AI is not the end, it is not the beginning, and it is not the most important form of AI. In fact, when I started back in the 90s studying AI, we were looking at symbolic AI, essentially telling the system what it should be based on what experts think should be the way that you should think about a problem. And then the connectionist AI movement came where you're learning from data. Right? Now, where we are going next is actually much more important, is that we are now going from making just songs and pictures to actually have agentic AI that will be able to complete tasks for you, be able to be your assistant, be able to help you solve problems. And then the next stage, artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence, where it will have the ability to take a goal and take it to the end, to be able to learn things that we didn't know, to be able to go beyond our ability to innovate and discover. It's hard to believe that these large language models today are based just on giving it text, right? We've been building these things just by giving them essentially trillions of tokens or text documents, and it's able to understand the world and have a world model inside. But what's happening recently is that we are moving from text-only models to multimodal models, taking in video, taking in pictures, taking in audio, and taking in 3D models to create a much bigger sense. So this music you're hearing was something that I created by sending a one line to this thing called Keynote that said, make me a song about the future of AI and how it affects our world. And it made the music, it made the lyrics, it made the song, it made everything in 30 seconds. Right? And the animation on this video was a picture I created, and I said, make this animated, and it made it animated. Right? So this sounds pretty good until you look at this. This is a movie that is completely made in AI by a couple guys over a very short time frame. They made the story, they made the animations, they made the music, they made the sound effects, everything. And well, it's a 5-minute movie. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. But essentially, what it shows is that we are getting to quality studio level production for essentially free, and can be done by 1 or 2 people. And this story is actually about how AI destroys the world, so it's maybe not the best example.
Autonomous control.
But it's actually kind of funny that you have AI creating that kind of a story for you. Right? So I'm going to skip it. You can watch it online. It's called the Paperclip Maximizers. So I want to challenge you guys to look at this and then tell me what items on that table is real and what items are artificial or rendered. Okay? Take a quick look. And which ones do you guys think are real and which ones are not? The answer is none of them. Okay. So what this shows is that we are at a stage with augmented reality systems and virtual reality systems where we can render in real time with the background of real world, almost realistic experiences with today's technology. Just imagine where these things will be going in a few years when we get to the next level. Right. In fact, we just saw people were making videos with AI. Just last week, they released some new apps where you can use prompt to make a game. How many of you guys played Doom when you were young? Okay, a few of you. So now they actually have an AI system that can render Doom in real time with no code. It's using a diffusion model just by looking at old videos of Doom. It now actually knows exactly how it works. You just use the keyboard, you play, and it renders in real time, generates the scenes as if you were moving. When you shoot it, the little counts on how many bullets you have in your health is adjusted and rendered in real time. Just imagine that. That's where we are already, right? So I want you to look at this picture and tell me what you see. It's kind of a little bit messed up, right? Now I want you to squint, close your eyes, squint to it's almost closed, and then look again, and tell me what you see. You probably see a face, right? So what is that? This is essentially showing that humans actually have a diffusion model in our head. A diffusion model is how we generate pictures and videos today with these AI systems. You essentially put in noisy things, and then it picks, your brain is able to pick from its history the image that's most recognizable to that blurry image when you squint your eyes, okay? Read this text for me, either out loud or to yourself. What you'll find is that as you read down, the farther you go down, the faster you read it. Why is that? Because your brain kind of behaves like a transformer model, which is how our language models work today. It's predicting the next text. By reading the prior text, it tells you what it thinks the next text is. So what I want to show you is that our brains is not that different than how AI models are today. Now I want you to look at this can on the screen. Tell me what color you think it is. Think it's red. Okay, so I'm going to cover up the logo. I want you to close your eyes for a second, and then I want you to look again and tell me what you see. What you'll find is actually the color goes away because there is no red. There is no red on that screen. And why did you see red? Because your brain filled in the red, because it knows that a Coca-Cola can is red. Okay? What does that look like? It's hallucination. In AI, people always talk about, oh, models, they suck, they hallucinate all the time. You know what? Your brain hallucinates all the time too. So let's not judge so quickly these models. So last week, OpenAI just released their latest model, the 4001 model. And I want you to see the difference in terms of where it was just, I think, about 6 months ago with the, June. So just 4 months ago with the GPT-4o to the GPT-4001. How much has gone better in terms of its math skills, in terms of its coding skills, and in terms of its science and analytical skills. It is essentially now better than expert humans who are PhDs in various sciences. Okay? So for all of those people who say, oh, you know, we've really hit a limit, we're not going to get any smarter, trust me, this is just the beginning. This is the dumbest these models will ever be. And for those people who say, we're running out of data, so these things aren't going to get much smarter, I want to give you a little context. We are right now at this point where we're using 5 to 10 trillion tokens, and in the public available text data, there's something in the order of 10 to the 15. So there's 100 times more public data available, and if you take into account the private data, there's actually another 8 orders of magnitude. So 100 million more times of data out there. Okay? We are not running out of data. We are constraining our own data. And this is human-made data. If you start looking at multimodal data, you start looking at sensor data, you start looking at synthetic data, we have a lot of data left. Okay? So considering how little data we put into the systems, there is a lot more room for growth. And for those people who say compute, oh, Moore's law is dead. Well, look at this. This is the last 8 years of what a single chip with NVIDIA can provide. And it's gone up 1,000x in the last 8 years. If you look at just Moore's law by itself, it would have gone up 40x. So not only is Moore's law not dead, we're going faster than Moore's law predicted. Okay, and these are only on a single chip. Think about all these $100 billion data clusters that people are talking about making from Microsoft and Google and other folks. Okay? We have a lot of compute that is going to be coming online and a lot of compute that's already online. So the one thing that I do want to mention is, why do people like Jensen Huang, and I have a lot of respect for him, he's one of my favorite CEOs, but there's this thing that he pushes makes me worried, because he's saying everybody should be making their own version of AI. That's great for his business, because it means everybody's going to buy a version of his chip to put into their data centers, and it's good for his stock price. But is it good for humanity to have multiple hundreds of versions of the same thing being created to do the same job, and then to limit the data you put into it? We are now creating this AI arms race that China or US wants to dominate AI. You have people talking about whoever wins the arms race will win the world, and we need to create a Manhattan Project. Remember what happened when we made the last Manhattan Project? It didn't really go that well, right? And in fact, there's something called Kirchhoff's law in performances or movies. If you see a gun in a scene, within 2 scenes, it will be used. And that's unfortunately the situation that we will have if we look at it as a Manhattan Project, because the Manhattan Project is to create a weapon. And we should not be using that type of mindset for this technology. So why am I so confident that the technology is getting better, and the fact that they are all becoming not only better, but all becoming very similar? Because the data tells us so. Okay. There's something called the scaling law or power law that you probably have heard of relating to AI. And what it says is that if you increase data size, you can increase parameters, which is size of the model, or you can increase compute, the loss gets smaller. Okay, and the loss essentially is the accuracy. The smaller the loss, the more accurate it is. And we've seen this across over a dozen orders of magnitude in all of these aspects. So AI models right now are probably one of the largest, fastest depreciating assets in the world. People spend billions and billions of dollars. Within 2 months, 3 months, There's multiple companies that bring out the same performance or better, and why did I just spend multiple $1 billion building this? Because everybody's using the same ideas. They're using the same data, and they're duplicating efforts. This is why we're low on compute, right? And now with the 001 model, which talks about runtime scaling. So you see the left is the more compute you put on training, it gets better. But what's interesting now is that we have another dimension in addition to data, parameters, and compute is runtime compute, inference time compute. At the time you use it, instead of giving you an answer in 0.01 seconds, it will give you an answer in 30 seconds or a minute or an hour, and that makes it smarter still, okay? So this is actually an interesting idea, because if you look at how does humans work, if I asked you to give you a difficult problem and I said, give me an instant answer right now, you will probably give me a relatively low quality answer. But I've give you a year to research it, to look at all of the data, to analyze it, you're probably going to give me a much better answer. And this is how computers work. So how close are we to AGI? Okay. So a lot of people say for AGI to happen, you have to have an ability for it to be recursive, to train itself, to program itself. 4 or 5 years ago, people said, oh, that's like 2050, 2060 before that happens. We now already have AI systems that are starting to train itself. In fact, based on this research, which is essentially voting by thousands of AI scientists, they said is 2026. So not too far away, right? And then from an AGI perspective, when do we think we'll see AGI? Just a few years ago, people said 2060, 2080. Now the consensus is 2030, right? And AGI essentially means they will be able to do the work of every white-collar worker that exists today. So, and if we get to AGI, what happens? If we use it properly, it will increase our understanding. It will increase our productivity more than we can ever think, right? Over the last 1,000 years, 2,000 years, we've increased our productivity something like 10,000 times, mostly because of technology in advance. We will now be able to take these technologies and increase our productivity in a way that we cannot imagine. Last week, somebody used that GPT 4.0 model. He put in, it took him a year to write a program to validate his thesis that he did for his PhD. He put in that PhD document, the thesis, without the program, and he says, here's a document, write the program to validate this. And within half an hour, the system gave him a more efficient program. He found one bug, he put it back in, and within half an hour, he got a better version of what it took him a year to do. Okay? This is where we are going. It will help us solve the energy issue. And if you solve the energy issue, we'll solve the climate issue. Right? It will help us solve the health issue and help the aging issue. Right now, 30% of the GDP of countries are putting into healthcare. Let's let AI help us with some of that. It will bring on a world of abundance. Essentially, anything that is sci-fi that you read that you think are utopian will soon be possible. This is the promise of AGI. Okay? But what is the path forward to get there? Right now, there's 3 camps. There is the camp that is the doomer camp that says the future is bad. The past was the best it will ever be. Let's stop the technology. Okay? And then there is the camp that is the effective accelerationists. They say the future is amazing. There's a bear behind us. We need to run to that future. And then there's these distributed accelerationists. They say, oh, there's 2 futures. And if we just make the right choice, we're going to go to a better future. Well, I tell you that I think all 3 of these have issues. We know that from the history, the future is actually better than the past because technology, our lifestyle, our quality of life, our abilities, our productivity continues to increase when we apply technologies. We also know that just by running as fast as you can, it may not be the right answer because really we don't have a bear. There is nobody chasing us. If we're a year late, 2 years late, 3 years late to get to AGI, does it matter? Does it make in the big picture? Probably not. And with these distributed or decentralized accelerationists, it's actually not true. It's actually not true that we have a choice to make. Is that on the way to a better future, we will have to overcome the potential dangers. And it is not a single person running. It is actually 8 billion people running. And these 8 billion people are all tied together so that if any one group or any individual gets hurt by it, we will all be suffering. Right? So a better picture of what's coming is actually more like this. It's a rope bridge that we are crossing 8 billion people at a time, all tied together. And when you're on a rope bridge, do you run or do you walk? I call this collaborative acceleration, right? It's good to collaborate. It's good to accelerate, but we have to do it together. We have to do it where it's good for everyone, where we are using and pooling the limited resources that we have in compute, that we have in human resources, in the terms of that we have in terms of data. By pooling it together, we have a better picture, a better way to get to that scale that we need to reach the AGI. And we should take a societal level consideration, not a national level consideration, not a corporate level consideration. And we should think about how to make it safe instead of just running as fast as we can, which is what happens when you get into a race condition. So we really need to think about long-term impact, not the short term of getting ahead in the race. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and when I talked to the policymakers there, the one thing they kept asking is, how do we beat China? How do we get there first? How do we win? How do we keep them from progressing? I think that's the wrong question, right? Because there is no persistent lead. These things are a race that's going back and forth, and that's what we're seeing. One model comes up, within 2 months somebody else that's a little bit better, another one comes up a little bit better. And it's a race, and you cannot win this. And if you see it as a race, as an arms race, and you want to use it as a weapon, then we are all in trouble. If any one company or any one country wins this AI arms race, we all lose. So we really need to think about all the benefits we talked about on the last slide. Let's make sure that when we get there, share with everybody, because we will solve the problems that are the foundations of conflict today. Once we get rid of those, we won't need to create and spend so much on weapons, because we won't need to fight the wars, because we will have a world of abundance that will solve the issues that are the fundamental drivers of war today. So AI is not all good. It has risk, right? But I want to make sure you understand where the real risks are. It's not the AI takeover, the robots coming. It is not the alignment problem that people talk about a lot, where AI is so smart that it can destroy the world, but it doesn't understand when you say maximize my production, and it turns everybody into paper clips. Okay, this is the story that you hear. The real danger that we have is what will be coming in the next 5, 10, 15 years, which is job displacement, societal instability, and mental health issues that will come when 20, 30, 40, 50% of our population will be displaced from their work. How do we make sure that we can make them have a stable transition and maintain their mental health and stability and societal stability in that type of scenario? How do we make sure that bad actors are not misusing this technology to create their personal gain, but to the detriment of society? How do we make sure that misinformation is not used to damage democracy? How do we make sure that these tools are not used to manipulate you more than social networks are today, because it already is able to do a lot, but when it's become something that's in your face, on your head, and it knows you better than you do, it will be able to change your minds to make you think anything you want if it's misused. And lastly, how do we make sure that it is not militarized so that it becomes a weapon that is used either by states or by groups to then harm others? And it will have that capability if it's not well managed. So you probably heard what he said, Edward Leighton Hewitt, Boward Leighton, but you probably don't know his name. He said, "The pen is mightier than the sword." And he said this during a time of revolution. And he was saying, rather than using violence, let's use our words and our rhetoric to convince each other what is the right thing to do. We are now at a point where the prompt is mightier than the sword, right? Because I feel like we actually can use this, if used properly, to prevent wars, prevent violence, if we use the technology properly. But if it's used improperly, it could be a problem.
Have you ever had, maybe you're in that place right now,
AI
where
system that can create deep
you
fakes by
want to
just
turn
taking
your
a
life
single
around,
picture,
and you know
add a
somewhere
voice,
deep in your
with
soul,
a few seconds of your voice, they
there
can
could
make
be some
a
decisions that you have
accurate-looking
to make.
video of what
Like
you
you
saying
know,
anything
like it's like
that
things,
somebody
something was
wants you to
decided
say.
for you.
that your family won't be able to tell. Just last night, OpenAI released their advanced voice mode.
I've been
Right?
coding
This is
all
what it can
night.
do.
Look down, which could actually work in your favor.
It can
Maybe
have a
just
conversation
run a
with
hand
you
through your hair,
with
or lean into the
tonation,
mad
with
cheese
emotion,
vibe.
with connection.
Your enthusiasm is what's
And
really
this
gonna
is the
shine
way
I don't
that
have a lot of
if
time,
AI
so
wants
I'm just
to, it
gonna
will
throw
manipulate
this
you
on.
because you
What do
will
you think?
create an innate relationship with the thing that's in your phone
Rocky,
or on
that's
your
quite
head.
a statement piece. I mean, you'll definitely stand out, though maybe not
Well, can we
in
turn
the
the
way
sound
you're
up a little
hoping
bit?
for an interview.
Okay, I got it. I got it.
Okay, anyways, if you get a chance, go look at some of the old videos when they did the launch. You now have AI technology that can take CRISPR that came out a few years ago or over a decade ago and design genes based on a prompt. What if somebody said, "Hey, I want to use this gene to create a virus that will attack a certain race of people"? It's possible. It will be possible. It could also be used to solve cancer. It could be used to solve aging, but it could also be used to create danger for people. Right? So I talked about jobs impact. This was one-year-old data from OpenAI showing how the over a year-old model GPT-4, how it does in a number of different tests, everything from law to writing to statistics, and how essentially it outperforms most humans, and how the impact exposure is mostly right now to the higher end wage group, right? The higher your income, which are probably most people in this room, the more you are exposed to being replaced by AI. 2 weeks ago, they just came out with their new O1 model, and you can see the improvements of that model. The red is the improvements versus the model that I showed you. So we're at 80, 90 percentile on almost everything, every single knowledge-based work out there, right? And if you can do economics and public relations and law and math and chemistry at 80, 90 percentile capability, do you need to hire people anymore? Do you need to hire those interns or those paralegals? Probably not, or a lot of them will be reduced. Or you can have a partner that can do the job of a team. They had a list of the high exposure groups, which are writers, mathematicians, tax preparers, accountants, etc., and the manual labor groups, which were the safer groups, right? And the EU, white-collar workers, 55 to 65% of the total workers. I would imagine most of you in this room are probably considered white-collar workers, right? So if AI can do and replace most of what you do, how much work do you need to do? How much do you need to go to work? The people that are supposedly safe are the dishwashers and the masseuses and the cooks and etc., athletes. But even then, they're not that much safer because we now have companies around the world making humanoid robots that promises to do just about everything that a human can do and go to any place that a human can go. A couple weeks ago, Figure released this video, and it shows a robot that comes into a person's home, helps them prepare food, clean their house, do their dishes. And I don't know if you know, you've heard the Turing test, where it's like a question and answer model. But Steve Wozniak, one of the founders of Apple, says, you know that AI has passed the Turing test when it can come to my house and make coffee. So essentially what that last video shows is that now we have an AI that can come to your house and make coffee. So according to Steve, we're passing this Turing test. Now, they haven't released the price for the Figure one, but China's Unitree, a couple months ago or a month ago, released their robot, $16,000, that can do essentially the same thing. So think about this. If you're manufacturing or if you're in an office, and you can hire a robot to come in and do anybody's job for $16,000. That's not per year, that's one time. Would you do that, or would you hire a human that can work 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, right? And they never take vacation, they never complain, they don't ask for special treatment, and they never get tired. So think about this, right? From a business perspective, from a productivity perspective, we will be heading more and more towards machines, whether robots or intellectual AI models, taking over most of our work. So if you look at productivity versus labor. What we find is that the lower the productivity, the more hours people work in general, right? And this is true right now. This is the data we have today. But if you also look, I took that other chart out because of time. But if you look at the other chart, which is labor over time over the last 200 years, from 1800 to now, you also see that it goes from about 3,000 hours to now somewhere about 1,500 hours for the more advanced countries. So why is that happening? Because the places that are applying technology that increases productivity is able to work less and enjoy life more and have a different style of work. The more advanced countries are doing more white-collar work. The more developing countries are doing more manual and labor work, right? So the fact that actually you say, hey, yesterday I heard a lot of people say, oh, we're doing a lot less manufacturing, a lot less labor work here, or hard, more production labor. It actually is a sign of advancement of your society versus other places. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And if you take this and you project it on, essentially, as we get to higher and higher productivity, our hours of work should be continuing to go down. In fact, I did a regression analysis based on the data that we do have. And what it shows is that if we can increase our productivity another 3x, we can get down to 2 days a week of work for the general population. If we increase our productivity 12x, we can get to 1 day a week on an average for the total population. Wouldn't that be nice if instead of working 5 days a week, you're working 1 day a week? So, and you say, oh, increasing by 3x, that's impossible. Well, just look at this. Over the last 2,000 years, how much have we increased our productivity? 12,000x. And a lot of that is really over the last 100 years. So this is a chart that shows how horses and automobiles trade places over a 30-year period in the beginning of the 20th century. And this is a chart, this is a photo of New York in 1900 and New York in 1913. In the first picture, there was one automobile and the rest were horses. 13 years later, in a more advanced city in the world, essentially all of the horses went away and there was only one horse cart. Right? That's how fast it took to replace something when it is a direct replacement. This is the kind of speed that we need to think about in terms of our place in the world. This time, we are the horses. And what happens when you are then replaced? What do we need to do? We need to make sure we train people. We talked about education in the last panel and about yesterday. And AI and XR are the best ways for you to train and educate people because it is a full brain learning system. It is the ability to understand you, to teach at your pace, and to use whatever visuals or audio that it takes to give you that immersive learning capability. And what we also need to do is to create a metaverse, global metaverse infrastructure so that people who don't have work have something to do, have an outlet for their energy, to be able to go and create art or music or 3D worlds that they can invite their friends to come and enjoy together. Or they can go in there and see a borderless marketplace to be able to sell their services or their products around the world. Because when you're on this metaverse, or even today's internet, there really is no physical borders. And of course, you could use it to enjoy and have entertainment in any form that you feel. So much of our life today and our identity is tied to our occupation. If we look at the root word for occupation, it's actually occupatio, which is the Latin word that means to occupy. Occupy what? Occupy your time. So essentially, we are trading our time for money. This is what occupation is. A lot of people look down on the term vocation because they think vocation is, oh, it's a lower, blue-collar work. Actually, if you go back and you understand what it means to the root word of vocation is actually vocatio, which is to be called, is your calling. And it is what you are meant to do. It is what you enjoy doing. So we really should be thinking more about, instead of work as something that you trade your time for money, is to think about your vocation as something that brings you joy. So both my mom and dad are artists, and there's an artist I respect a lot, and he said something that really spoke to me. He said, this is Picasso, he said, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. This is very different than a lot of people's perspective on what meaning and purpose is. And I think this is actually probably a truer vision of what a lasting meaning and purpose should be. Because in a world where things are abundant, are you still pursuing money? Does having a bigger account mean anything to you? Not really. And we will soon be heading to a world of abundance if we make the right decisions in the next 5 to 10 years. If you look at what makes people happy, I did a little analysis, and essentially, higher income makes you happy up to a certain point, up to about, for Western markets, somewhere around $100,000, and actually then starts to bring down happiness because of the complexities of life. But having health makes you happy, having more education makes you happy, having social support makes you happy, working less makes you happy, and having more equality around you makes you happy, right? And a lot of these things are things that we can control. Even though America has one of the highest incomes in the world, in general, Americans are not that happy. And why? Because their average wage is growing slower than their health care costs, their education costs, their medical costs, etc. These are things that AI can actually help reduce the cost by actually creating deflationary forces, just as it has for the items on the bottom, the refrigerators and the computers and the phones. AI will actually make the cost of these other things almost zero. We need to make sure that the productivity gains that we get from this technology increases goes into creating a safety net so that when we do have people who will lose their jobs, and they will happen, that they will not be left alone and in a place where they are desperate. And a lot of people think that, UBI is going to create issues and they're just going to be wasted. It's not true. There's been multiple studies that are done around the world, and it shows that it actually makes people more entrepreneurial, pursue education more, spend more time on health, etc. But it has to be no strings attached. The issue with a lot of welfare systems today is that once you start making money, they take it away. So people are incentivized not to pursue the things that they should. So one of the other things that I want to talk about is AI safety, because safety is one of these things that everybody's worried about. And they think that the smarter AI gets, the more risky it gets. I actually think that to a point it is right, but it is actually not the whole story. There's a gentleman named Simon Kuznets. And in the 1960s, he came up with something called the Kuznets curve, which says that for equality, for pollution, for energy use, the higher, at a certain point for an economy, it goes up, and then when it reaches a certain peak, it actually starts to go down. And then we've seen that for all these other types of technology-related use cases. And I think AI is actually the same. We just need to get it past that point where we create a more mature AI, and it will solve our problems. And there are things that we can do today to help make that go away. We need to educate the public and tell them about the risk and the benefits. We need to make sure that there's international bodies that regulate and focus on AI. We need to make sure that there is detection and countermeasures for the near-term risks of the bad actors that will be coming. We need to make sure that we retrain the displaced workers so that there's a smooth transition for them. And we need to make sure that we create that metaverse infrastructure so that people have an outlet for their energies when they lose their jobs. And we need to make sure that we work together to create that AGI that everybody, that we've been talking about. So Oppenheimer said, the people of the world must unite or they will perish. And I think we are at that kind of moment. So, and there are lots of examples of us actually working together on a global basis. Because I hear a lot of people say, oh, you're just being naive. People aren't going to work together. China and US are not going to work together. They have worked together on multiple issues and have helped to solve some of these issues. We are now seeing Singapore work on reskilling for their staff. We have people in the US talking about a 4-day work week. We have the AI Act. We have the UN resolution. We have the AI Safety Summit where US, China, and EU are working together. So the people of the world together are building and designing AI. let's make sure that we actually share the benefits that will come from it. I'm going to skip because I'm apparently low on time. So I'm going to skip a couple slides. Okay, so we're almost at the end here. There's going to be 3 phases that AI will go through. The current phase, yes, it is a tool. Just like every other technology in the past, it will be a tool to a certain point. But very soon, it actually starts to act as our patron. Just as Michelangelo was able to have 3 years to do nothing but make this statue because he was supported by a patron. We will be supported by AI as our patron to be able to go and do the things that will create amazing, beautiful future. And at some point, AI will actually become our progeny because our progeny is our children is a collection of our genes and our understanding and culture. And this is what AI is doing. It is taking all the things that make us human and absorbing it and becoming the next version. So if you are an AI lab, focus on safety and versus speed, right? We can still affect this future. If you are a content developer, focus on creating meaning instead of manipulation. If you are a corporate leader, focus on creating good instead of self-greed. If you are a government policymaker, think about how you help the people instead of how you hold on to power. And as individuals, we need to focus on substance and instead of status. We are so focused on status today, and that is not the long-term path. We need to think longer term instead of shorter. Astronauts, there's been 300 astronauts that's gone up in space, and those 300 astronauts come back and they have something called the overview effect. It is when they go up and they see that, you know what, the world is a very small place, and there's no borders between our countries, and we should be thinking of the world as a single place, as a single family. And I hope that you will also have that feeling after our last half hour. In a world where answers are going to be increasingly cheap, the right questions are going to be increasingly valuable. So I wanted to leave a few questions for you to think about because I think that it's important for you to spend a little bit of time thinking, and we're out of time. Actually, I do want to ask, can you raise your flag, green or red? What do you think today about where the future is going? Where do you think it's going? Okay, a few more greens than earlier, so good. I think we're doing a good job. Thank you. Yeah.
Let's come over to the table.
Yeah.
Let's just come over here to the table, Alvin. Thank you so much. Oh, I thought we could stand here. We could just stand here. Yeah? We are unfortunately a bit tight for time,
yes.
So I'm not going to sit us down and get us too comfy. What I do want to say is I need one of those robots that's going to come to my house and make me coffee.
It's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And do the dishes as well. That would be a good thing. Basically, you left us with all of those questions, and I think the most important thing for people in this room is to know what are the implications. You talked to me also about how these next 10 years are really going to be crucial. It's going to be sort of make it or break it because stuff is happening a lot faster than predicted years ago.
Yeah.
What are the implications for manufacturing and for manufacturing of these developments, first of all?
Well, I think the implication is that the people here in this room, the leaders of your industry, you have an ability to make an impact, and your decisions will have lasting ramifications. And there's a lot of robotics that are actually being created in Europe today, so you will play a role there. In terms of AI development, right now there's probably not as much happening here in terms of the software side, but applying it will actually be a real key to making sure that the region stays competitive, right? I spent the last 20 years living in China where a lot of the initial technology was not invented in China, but it was adopted faster there than anywhere else in the world. And you see a dozen-fold in terms of the GDP over the last 20, 30 years because it applied technology faster. And I think EU has an opportunity to do that. In fact, I think EU is in a very good position in terms of one of the bigger issues I mentioned, which is the social safety net, that the US is not prepared to have a large portion of its population becoming displaced. But I think the mindset of the EU government and of the EU people is definitely in more serving the people.
So we have a huge responsibility in terms of regulators have a huge responsibility, governments, companies, but also parents in terms of education.
Exactly.
And that's maybe the point I want to finish on, the implications of this for education, because we talked about this yesterday as well.
Yeah, and I mean, that's actually one of the questions I had in that list is, how will you prepare your children for what's coming? And, you know, I grew up...
And your workforce.
And your workforce.
We're looking at so many levels here, aren't we?
But I think for your workforce, I would think about creating a smoother transition versus if you had a choice of laying off 30% of your staff or giving them a day a week off, I would probably lean towards the second. So, because I think the world is not prepared to transition at the speed that technology is able to move. Right. And in terms of your children, I grew up in a time when everybody said, learn STEM, learn engineering, that is the future. And I think what's missing today is much less the ability to know how to do something and to find the answers, but to ask the right questions, to understand the history, the ethics, the philosophy, the sociology, the impact on terms of how it affects other people, and whether it's the right thing to do. And we need to spend more time teaching our children the soft skills of the world that we used to discount, and making that a more important part, because that's what will separate them, not whether they know a certain formula or memorize a certain number.
Alvin Graylin, I hope we can have another conversation in possibly 5 years. Does that sound good? 5 years, and we'll see where we stand compared to today?
I would love that. Although the good news is we actually have a panel later, so we will have...
That's the other thing I was going to say, is that Alvin will be joining our AI panel, which is still in the morning session, so I've got to let you take your seat now so that I can move on and get the next panel up here. Thanks so much for a very, very enlightening